Have you ever felt like there is an invisible wall when you try to learn a new language? It is a feeling of frustration, like you are an outsider to a whole world of conversation. Imagine a classroom in North London in the year 1997. Inside, there is a group of 16-year-old students. These teenagers have been labeled hopeless cases. They have been told many times that they could never learn another language. They are skeptical and maybe a little defiant. They are not expecting what is about to happen. In front of them stands an interesting man named Michel Thomas. He is in his 80s and has a quiet intensity about him. He makes a very bold promise to the students. He tells them he will teach them to speak fluent French. He will not do it in years or even in months. He promises to do it in one single, intensive week. The disbelief in the room is so strong you can almost feel it.
As the days of the week go by, something extraordinary begins to happen. These students, who the traditional system had given up on, start to speak French. They begin to build sentences and to understand the language. By the end of the week, their transformation is truly astonishing. Their confidence and their ability in French are far greater than anyone expected. Their success was even greater than their own expectations. This amazing achievement was filmed for a BBC documentary. The show was called The Language Master. It made Michel Thomas and his unusual methods famous to the public. The students themselves said something remarkable about the experience. They said, "We learned in 1 week what normally takes 5 years."
But who is this man who could perform such miracles? Michel Thomas was a person of deep and surprising contrasts. His life story reads like a Hollywood thriller. He was a decorated war hero from World War II. He was awarded the Silver Star for his great bravery and action against the enemy. He was also a survivor of the Holocaust. He experienced the unimaginable horrors of Nazi concentration camps and torture. He was a polyglot, a master of more than 10 languages. He taught Hollywood's most famous stars, from Grace Kelly to Woody Allen. He also taught Barbara Streisand and Emma Thompson. And most famously, he was the creator of a revolutionary language learning system. His system, the Michel Thomas method, was often seen as controversial.
How did this man, who experienced so much suffering and showed so much resilience, develop his system? How could his system unlock language for anyone, so easily and in just a few days? What was the secret behind his method? His method continues to fascinate, inspire, and cause debate even years after his death. This is the story of Michel Thomas, a journey from dark, pre-war Europe to the sunny streets of Beverly Hills. We will explore his early life as Moniek Kroskof in Poland. We will follow his terrible experiences during the war. These experiences would completely change his understanding of the human mind. We will explore how his unique language teaching method was born. We will look at its main principles, its great successes, and the controversies around it. Finally, we will look at the legacy of the language master. His life is a powerful story about the strength of the human spirit.
The story of Michel Thomas begins in a world that was about to fall into chaos. He was born Moniek Kroskof on February 3, 1914. He was born in Lodz, Poland, which was then part of the Russian Empire. His family was a prosperous and Jewish family. They owned textile factories in the city. This gave him a life of comfort and privilege. But Lodz was an ugly, industrial city. Its chimneys sent foul smoke into the sky, making the air polluted. Moniek's early life was shaped by both privilege and prejudice.
Moniek's mother, Frida, was a strong and independent woman. This was highly unusual for a woman of her time. When she was 18, she rebelled against an arranged marriage. When the marriage failed, she demanded a divorce. This was a very bold action in that era, especially for a wealthy Jewish family. This spirit of not conforming to rules may have influenced young Moniek. In fact, Thomas himself said he made an early effort to develop his mind and memory. He saw it as a defense against a world that he felt was hostile. He talked about remembering details from when he was a baby in his cradle. He called this his first act against being overwhelmed. This shows he was building his mental strength from a very young age. This skill would be very important for him in the difficult years to come.
The world around him was grim. During and after World War I, Lodz was a place of fear. Its streets were unpaved and muddy. Many people had fled, leaving it almost like a ghost town when Moniek was a baby. In the 1920s, anti-Semitism was rising in Poland. This led his parents to make a difficult choice. When Moniek was 7 years old, they sent him to Breslau, Germany. The city is now called Wrocław and is in Poland. He went to live with his Aunt Idessa. At first, he said he felt comfortable there. But the shadow of prejudice was always there.
In his new school in Germany, he was the only Jewish student in his class. He did not hide this fact. He showed early courage and a strong sense of his identity. While his classmates were drawing swastikas on their school books, he did something different. Young Moniek drew the Star of David on the front of his books. This small act of standing up for himself in a hostile place was a sign of his future resilience. It showed he understood that symbols and identity were important. But his time in Germany was coming to an end. The rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in 1933 made his life there impossible. Once again, Moniek Kroskof was forced to move.
This time, he moved to France. He sought refuge there and continued his education. He studied philology, which is the study of language in its historical context, at the University of Bordeaux. Later, he continued his studies at the famous Sorbonne in Paris. Then, he wanted to understand the human mind more deeply. So he went to the University of Vienna to study psychology. His academic studies in language and psychology would become the foundation for his later work. He was studying these things as Europe was moving closer to war.
His time in Austria was very short. In March 1938, Nazi Germany annexed Austria in an event called the Anschluss. The results for Thomas were immediate and terrible. The Polish embassy in Vienna took away his passport. This action made him stateless. In the chilling German phrase of the time, he was vogelfrei. This meant he was like an outlaw, with no legal right to exist in any country. He was a man without a country, hunted and in danger. He was forced into hiding in Vienna, and his life became desperate. This profound trauma of becoming stateless would shape his future.
In October 1938, he and his fiancée, Suzanne Adler, tried to escape from Austria. It was a daring attempt. They were caught by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, at the Siegfried Line in Germany. But showing great resourcefulness or having amazing luck, they managed to get away. They eventually walked across the border into a French village. From there, they traveled to Paris and then to the city of Nice. But France was also on the edge of war, a nation about to fall into darkness.
During these difficult early years, Moniek Kroskof was surrounded by a mix of languages. He was born in Poland, so he would have been exposed to Polish and Yiddish. His move to Germany brought German into his daily life. Then he lived and studied in France, so he learned French. The way he learned these languages as a young person is not written down in detail. But this constant need to adapt to new languages gave him a rich, practical foundation. He was not just learning languages in a classroom, he was living them. He was using them to navigate complex and often dangerous situations. This real-life use of language probably helped him understand how different languages worked. It likely laid the subconscious groundwork for his future method. His method heavily emphasized breaking languages into their basic building blocks. The boy who drew a Star of David in defiance was becoming a young man whose survival was linked to his mastery of words.
As the 1930s ended, the war finally came to Europe. For Moniek Kroskof, the start of World War II in September 1939 was a call to action. He did not hesitate. He volunteered for the French army and was assigned to an intelligence corps in Nice. His language talents were likely already seen as very valuable. However, the early quiet period of the war soon ended with the grim reality of French defeat. When France fell to the Nazis in 1940, Kroskof was in Nice. The city was now under the control of the collaborationist Vichy government. This created an extremely dangerous environment for Jewish people.
It was during this dark time that he made a critical decision for his survival. He changed his name from Moniek Kroskof to Michel Thomas. This was not just a simple change, it was a necessary step to stay alive. The name Michel Thomas was less obviously Jewish. It allowed him to operate more easily and safely within the growing French resistance movement. As Michel Thomas, he became deeply involved in the dangerous work of the resistance. Publicly, he worked as an entrepreneur, organizing shows in grand hotels. This was a cover for his secret work. He helped Jewish refugees, a task that was filled with danger. Later, in the city of Lyon, he recruited these desperate people into the resistance organization itself.
But his secret activities did not go unnoticed. He was arrested multiple times by the Vichy authorities. He was once charged with influence peddling and spent 4 months in solitary confinement. His journey through wartime France led him through a series of brutal camps. He was sent to Louvernay, an internment camp in the Pyrenees known for its harsh conditions and starving inmates. He was then forced into slave labor at Gardanne. He worked for 4 months in an underground coal mine. This terrible experience left him with black lung, a disease diagnosed years later. He also worked at Les Mis, another slave labor camp where he was forced to cut down trees.
His ordeal continued when he was interned at Les Millis. This was a deportation camp near Aix-en-Provence. It was chillingly known by local people as l'abattoir, which means the slaughterhouse. It was a final stop for many Jews before they were shipped to death camps like Auschwitz. For 6 desperate weeks, Thomas managed to hide inside Les Millis. He did this to avoid the transports to the east, which were becoming more and more frequent. It was an incredible act of endurance and cleverness in a place of constant danger. Finally, in August 1942, using forged identity papers, he made a daring escape. He then made his way to Lyon, which was a major center of resistance activity.
In Lyon, Michel Thomas walked into a trap in February 1943. It was set by the infamous Gestapo chief Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. Thomas was stopped and interrogated by Barbie himself. In this moment of extreme danger, Thomas used his courage, quick thinking, and language skills. Although he was fluent in German, he pretended he could not speak the language at all. He presented himself as a simple French painter who was not interested in politics. It was a masterful performance and a psychological risk that succeeded. Barbie was deceived and eventually released him. Years later, in 1987, Thomas confronted his former interrogator again. This time, he was a witness for the prosecution at Klaus Barbie's war crimes trial in Lyon.
Freedom was short-lived. Just a month after his escape from Barbie, in March 1943, Thomas was arrested again. This time he was caught by the Milice, the brutal French paramilitary militia that worked with the Gestapo. What followed was 6 hours of relentless torture. He was tortured by both the Gestapo and the French police. It was during this agonizing experience that Michel Thomas made a profound discovery. This discovery would not only help him survive, but it would also create the psychological foundation for his life's work.
As his tormentors tried to break him, Thomas focused his entire mental energy on one thing. He focused on inventing a story that was believable enough to satisfy them. In this state of extreme concentration, he found he could separate his mind from his physical suffering. "I concentrated so hard," he later said, "that I stopped feeling pain. I was amazed at myself." This experience of overcoming unbearable pain through pure mental discipline fascinated him. It showed him the untapped reserves of the human mind. He realized the immense, largely unexplored power of the brain. It was this revelation, born in a torture chamber, that led him to dedicate his life to education and understanding how the mind learns. He did not break. Aided by the resistance, he escaped once more.
This terrible experience seems to have been a turning point for him. The intense mental effort he used to survive the torture directly shaped his later teaching philosophy. His method would later emphasize a completely stress-free learning environment. He believed the teacher, not the student, should be responsible for overcoming any learning problems. He wanted to create for his students the total opposite of the extreme stress he had suffered. He wanted an environment where the mind could absorb information without the block of anxiety. He understood from his own extreme experience that a person's mental state is the most important thing for learning.
No longer just a hunted man, Thomas became an active fighter. He joined a commando group near Grenoble. He participated in sabotage operations. He blew up bridges and destroyed enemy communications. Later, his amazing language abilities led him to a new role. He joined the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Corps, also known as the CIC. At first, he worked as an unpaid scout and interpreter. His languages, which had helped him create new identities and trick his enemies, were now weapons for the Allied forces.
As the war came to a bloody end, Thomas was on the front lines of the Allied advance into Germany. He was with U.S. troops at the liberation of the Dachau concentration camp on April 29, 1945. The horrors he saw there must have been unimaginable. But he turned his experiences into action. He learned the location of Emil Mao, the notorious hangman of Dachau. Just 2 days later, Thomas and a colleague arrested him. He also played a role in capturing SS Major Gustav Knittel, who was wanted for the Malmedy massacre. One report even credited Thomas with helping to capture some 2,500 Nazi war criminals. His work as a Nazi hunter continued even after the war ended.
In the final, chaotic week of World War II, Thomas performed another remarkable service. He received a tip about a convoy of trucks near Munich. The trucks were carrying a massive collection of official Nazi Party documents. This included the membership card file of over 10 million Nazi Party members worldwide. The Gestapo had shipped these records to a paper mill in Freimann, Germany. They planned to pulp the documents, to turn them into wet paper and destroy the evidence forever. Thomas made sure these vital records were protected. They would later provide priceless, undeniable evidence for prosecutors at the Nuremberg trials. The records also helped future generations bring Nazi war criminals to justice.
The end of the war brought relief, but also profound personal tragedy. Michel Thomas learned that his parents and most of his extended family had been murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. It was the last time he had seen them when he visited them in Poland in 1937. Despite this devastating loss, he did something extraordinary. He chose a path of reconciliation instead of pure revenge. Shortly after the war ended, he organized a special gala evening in Munich. He called it a reconciliation concert. He used German musicians and brought together former friends and enemies. He did this even though it was against the strict Allied non-fraternization laws. It was an act born from a belief that there had to be a different, better future built on understanding, not hate. This concert showed the same spirit that would later drive him to change the world through education.
With the war behind him, Michel Thomas looked to the future. In 1947, he immigrated to the United States. His excellent war service record with the U.S. Army helped him enter the country. He chose Los Angeles, California, as his new home, where some of his family lived. The man who had survived concentration camps and hunted Nazis now had a new mission. He wanted to revolutionize the way people learned languages. On the glamorous Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, he opened his first language school. It was first named the Polyglot Institute. Later, it was renamed the Michel Thomas Language Center. From the very beginning, he made his bold claim. His unique method could help students become conversational in a new language after only a few days of study. This was a radical idea compared to traditional, slow language education.
His reputation grew, and language centers with his name opened in New York and London. The idea of learning a language quickly, especially from a man with such an amazing life story, was very attractive. It was especially attractive to the rich and famous. His list of students looked like a who's who of Hollywood. Diplomats, powerful business leaders, and many movie stars came to him for lessons. Grace Kelly, who later became Princess Grace of Monaco, learned French from him. Other famous clients included Woody Allen, Barbra Streisand, Emma Thompson, and Mel Gibson. Actors like in Bancroft, Donald Sutherland, Warren Beatty, and Eve Montan also learned from him. These stars often paid large sums, reportedly thousands of dollars, for face-to-face lessons with the master. Photos from that time show Thomas in his office, surrounded by pictures of his famous students.
What was the origin of this method that so many people loved? At its heart was a deep belief, a philosophy that Thomas would state over and over again. He said, "There is no such thing as a student with learning difficulties, only teachers with teaching difficulties." In his system, the teacher had full and complete responsibility for the student's learning. This was a radical idea that shifted the responsibility from the learner to the instructor. This core belief was deeply connected to his wartime experiences. It was connected to that moment of clarity he had while being tortured. His discovery that the mind could overcome pain and stress by focusing became a foundational idea. He came out of the war determined to explore how the brain really worked and to unlock that potential in others.
Michel Thomas had ambitions that went far beyond teaching French to movie stars. He believed his method had the potential to change the world. He chose to start with languages for a specific reason. He considered them the most alien thing a person could learn. He believed that if he could find the secret to teaching languages, the same principles could be used to teach almost anything. This big vision of freeing minds and creating a template for the future of learning shows the impact of his wartime revelation. It was not just about teaching languages efficiently. It was about rethinking the entire learning process. This mission was driven by a man who had seen the worst of human cruelty, but still had faith in the power of the human mind.
The Michel Thomas method was built on principles that challenged normal language education. At its very core was a philosophy designed to remove the biggest barrier to learning: stress. Thomas firmly believed all stress inhibits true and effective learning. So, his entire approach was created to eliminate anxiety, pressure, and the fear of failure. A key part of this stress-free environment was the idea that the teacher is fully responsible for the student's learning and remembering. This led to his famous saying, "There's no such thing as a poor student, only a poor teacher." By taking this burden away from the student, Thomas aimed to create a relaxed mind that was ready to learn.
This philosophy showed up in several practical ways. First, absolutely no memorization was required or even allowed. Students were told specifically not to try to memorize vocabulary lists or grammar rules. Second, there were no books to study and no notes to take during the lesson. Third, there were no homework assignments. The learning was meant to happen in the moment. It happened through active conversation with the instructor and the material. The main principle was another of his famous phrases: "What you understand, you know, and what you know, you don't forget." The focus was completely on comprehension. He believed that true understanding naturally leads to remembering.
One of the most unique features of his courses is the virtual classroom format. The audio programs usually have a live lesson with an instructor, often Michel Thomas himself. The lesson also includes two students who are also beginners. The listener is encouraged to become the third student. You should actively think about the problems the instructor gives. You pause the audio and respond before you hear the recorded students' answers. The students on the recording are not actors reading a script. Their interactions, their successes, and their mistakes are all real. This helps the listener in many ways. It can reduce the home learner's anxiety because they hear other people making similar mistakes. It creates a more immersive and less lonely experience than just listening to a teacher.
The teaching engine of the method is its building block approach to language. Thomas believed that any language could be broken down into its most essential parts. These building blocks are usually verbs and core grammar structures. They are presented to the learner in a logical sequence. The learner is then guided to assemble these blocks to form their own sentences. You learn to say what you want to say, not just repeat memorized phrases. This focus on understanding the underlying structure is a major strength of the method. It allows students to build surprisingly complex sentences from simple parts, often within the first hour.
For example, in a French lesson, Thomas might start with words that are similar in English and French. Words like possible or comfortable. Then he might take a common phrase like c'est la vie, which means that's life. He would break it down. C'est means it is and la vie means life. With these parts, the student can immediately make new sentences like c'est possible. Then he would slowly add more parts, like a negative word or a pronoun. Soon, the student can confidently build a sentence like, Ce n'est pas très comfortable pour moi. This means it is not very comfortable for me. The teacher acts as a mental architect, carefully designing the learning path. As Thomas himself said, I am the architect who builds the house. It's up to you to decorate it.
Michel Thomas's unique methods and big claims brought him both fame and intense criticism. A key moment of public recognition came in 1997 with the BBC documentary, The Language Master. The film showed Thomas teaching French to a group of teenagers who had been told they were hopeless cases. The documentary showed their amazing transformation in just 1 week. This was a powerful validation for the public. But it may have also created some skepticism in traditional academic circles. To them, such fast, televised results might have looked more like a show than serious teaching science.
For years later, in 2001, Thomas faced a different kind of public test. The Los Angeles Times published a long, front-page article by writer Roy Rivenberg. The title was provocative, Larger Than Life. The article cast significant doubt on many parts of Thomas's dramatic life story. It questioned his war record, his presence at the liberation of Dachau, and his escape from Klaus Barbie. Thomas described the article as deeply humiliating and damaging to his reputation. He felt it suggested his most important wartime experiences were made up or exaggerated. The title itself suggested the problem. His life story was so extraordinary that it invited skepticism.
In response to the article, Michel Thomas filed a defamation lawsuit against the newspaper. However, he eventually lost the case. The court said that while the reporter could have done a more responsible job, it was not illegal. But this legal loss did not stop Thomas from seeking to clear his name. He and his supporters worked even harder to prove his life story was true. This work was led by the British author Christopher Robins. Robins wrote Thomas's biography, Test of Courage, The Michel Thomas Story. The book, which became a bestseller, was carefully researched. It contained archival documents from camps, Vichy government records, resistance papers, and U.S. Army reports. It was a complete attempt to provide undeniable evidence of his wartime experiences and restore his reputation.
The final victory in his battle for the truth came in 2004, just a year before his death. Based on the large amount of evidence presented, much of it detailed in the book Test of Courage, the United States Army made a decision. They awarded Michel Thomas the Silver Star. It is one of the nation's highest military decorations for gallantry in action against the enemy in France during World War II. The award was presented at a special ceremony at the National World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. For Michel Thomas, who was then 90 years old, it was a profound and public vindication. It was a formal acknowledgement of the courage and service that had been questioned. The man whose life was often called larger than life finally had the documented proof to support its most extraordinary claims.
Michel Thomas passed away on January 8, 2005, at the age of 90. He left behind a complex and powerful legacy. His language courses, first on tapes and CDs, and later in books and digital apps, continued to be very popular. The Michel Thomas method did not die with its creator. Publishers continued to produce his original courses and also commissioned new ones. They added new languages like Mandarin Chinese, Japanese, Russian, and Arabic. The arrival of smartphone apps brought new interactive parts to the traditionally audio-only format. This adapted the method for a new generation of learners.
The lasting appeal of the Michel Thomas method comes from several key strengths. Its most praised feature is its ability to provide a fast and solid foundation in the grammar of a language. Students often find they can build sentences much more quickly than they thought possible. The stress-free, confidence-building environment is a big attraction for people who are scared of traditional language classes. The virtual classroom setup, where you learn alongside other students on the recordings, is engaging and supportive for many people. Many people have a aha moment of sudden understanding. As one learner said, 5 minutes in and you already feel like you're winning. Actress Emma Thompson called it the most extraordinary learning experience of my life.
But alongside its strengths, the Michel Thomas method also has acknowledged weaknesses. One of the most common is its limited vocabulary. Students learn how to form sentences correctly, but they lack a wide range of words. Thomas himself admitted this, saying he built the house and the student had to decorate it. Pronunciation is another area of concern. Michel Thomas himself was often not a native speaker of the languages he taught. His own accent, plus the errors made by the students on the tapes, can be a flawed model for beginners. The method is mostly oral, so it offers little to no practice in reading or writing. The controlled environment of the recordings is very different from real, fast-paced conversations.
There are other criticisms as well. Ironically, despite this stress-free promise, Thomas's own teaching style in some recordings can sound negative or impatient. He sometimes interrupts students and can seem critical. Some learners find this unpleasant and against the method's philosophy. Also, some of the language taught might be overly formal or even outdated. For example, the French phrase comme si is often considered a sign of a non-native speaker today. Many agree that the method generally only takes learners to a basic or low intermediate level. It is not a complete solution to achieve fluency. It is best used as a starting tool, which must be supplemented with other resources.
The Michel Thomas method is often compared to other popular audio programs, like Pimsleur. Both aim for conversational ability. Pimsleur uses dialogues between native speakers with structured repetition. It uses a system called graduated interval recall, a type of spaced repetition to help with memory. Michel Thomas simulates a classroom lesson with more direct grammar explanation in English. Thomas also explicitly forbids trying to memorize anything. Some find Pimsleur is better for listening and speaking practice with native accents. Others prefer Michel Thomas for its clearer initial explanation of grammar.
Compared to Rosetta Stone, the differences are even bigger. Michel Thomas is almost all audio and uses English for instruction. Rosetta Stone is heavily image-based and uses immersion with almost no English. Rosetta Stone is better for visual learners, while Michel Thomas is better for auditory learners. A more direct comparison is with the Paul Noble method. Noble's approach is very similar to Thomas's. One key difference is that Paul Noble's courses use native speakers to give examples. This can provide a better pronunciation model. Noble is also often described as having a more encouraging tone.
The life of Michel Thomas was a story of almost epic size. It included the fear of a Jewish family in a Europe falling into darkness. It included the terrible horrors of Nazi persecution and the bravery of the French resistance. From these ashes, he reinvented himself in America. He became a language teacher to the stars and the architect of a method that promised to make language learning available to everyone. His journey was a testament to amazing resilience. It was a story of a deep belief in the untapped power of the human mind, a belief that was created in the extreme environment of a torture chamber.
At its heart, Michel Thomas's philosophy was about more than just learning verbs or building sentences. It was based on a deep understanding of the human mind, an understanding born from a life lived on the very edge of human endurance. His main idea was that true learning comes from deep understanding, free from the chains of stress. This was a philosophy for unlocking potential, not just in language, but in any area of life. While debates about his method will continue, Michel Thomas certainly succeeded in making his ideas available to the world. His voice and the echo of his unique approach to unlocking the world's languages continues to be heard by learners across the globe. It is a lasting legacy of a truly remarkable life.